Thank you guys for coming. It's our 5th wonderful event that we've been able to host. Luckily, we're back in person, so we're really excited about it. We're going to start the night off with Mark Yeager, our CEO. He's got a few kind words, I think, for us, and then we'll introduce the ladies and we'll get into it.
Thanks, Emily. Appreciate everybody, coming out. As Emily mentioned, this is the 5th time we've done it. She deserves a tremendous amount of the credit. She has really been the driving force behind getting this started and keeping it going, right? And it's a dialogue that's extremely important to us. But despite COVID, we were able to keep the momentum going. 2 years we had to do it remote. It's wonderful to be back live at the Wood with all of you here. So thank you so much for coming. It's going to be an awesome program. We're super excited about it. And it's all for a great cause, right? So we're all here to, I think, have a dialogue about something that's extremely important to Redwood as an organization, but more importantly to the industry as a whole. It's a challenge that we've had for a long time as an industry, and it's something that is close to my heart because my mom was in the logistics industry, as an executive for 20 years. And she did during that time some of the toughest things, in the industry, including collections, back in Chicago in the 70s and the 80s. And she did it well. And she was an incredibly talented executive. But, I think she never really got the credit that she deserved, for that. All the hard work that she put in and all the success that she had. And when I look back on that, I think there's reasons for that, right? And I think that's going to be sort of part of the thing that we're going to talk about, over the course of the next couple of hours, right? But I know for a fact that, while she wouldn't be happy necessarily that she didn't get the recognition that she deserved, she would love to see this. Love to see so many women pursuing a career in what I think is absolutely a tremendous industry. And we're a better industry for it, and there's still a long way to go. I think we've made progress in the last 30 years or so. But there's still, many issues that we have to confront. And the way to do that is to talk about it. And that's what we're going to do today, right? So super excited about it. Really appreciate all the effort for you folks to come in, and really appreciate the panelists, coming out and supporting what's a tremendous cause. So enjoy the evening, have fun, and thanks again for coming in. And I'll turn it back over to Emily.
Thank you. I hope my children recognize that like you do. That's most important. No, really excited. I know there's a lot of familiar faces here, some newbies here. Obviously, the support from Redwood is huge. The fact that the executives continue to allow us to have this conversation. As you mentioned, it's very important. I think the statistic at this point, I don't know if Andrew is here, is 25% female, right, in supply chain and logistics, and Redwood's at 32%. So we're getting up there. I think we would be kidding ourselves if we didn't wish it was more 50-50, but we're getting there closer and closer. But we have a really great panel. These ladies are fantastic. We've had a couple prep calls, and there's a ton of content that they're going to bring to the table today. A couple housekeeping things. On your table, the QR codes. So Blended Pledge is the philanthropy organization that we're really kind of trying to raise money for today. Obviously, Redwood is very, very passionate about philanthropy. That's something we continuously work on, continuously put out there, looking to drive better things to different organizations. So this one was important to us because she's really focused on elevating women in that space and bringing those kind of voices up. So I won't steal your thunder there, I'll let you get into that. But the other pieces, there are gift bags. If you didn't get a gift bag, make sure you do. And then also we're going to do a Q&A probably towards the end. So if you have questions, make sure you think of them, write them down, whatever you need to do. But with that, I think we're ready to get started. So Sarah Barnes-Humphrey is going to be our host tonight. Very excited about that.
All right, so we're going to get started. Can you guys hear me? Oh, there we go. All right, so we're going to get started. We've got Hillary
who's going to join me up here as well. We've got Elise Lay, we've got Audrey Ross, and we've got Charlie Sapp. These are very good chairs. Love it. And thank you so much, Emily and Mark. So my name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, the Blended Pledge, and I'm also the founder of... Working? Hello? Okay. Blended Pledge. And so Blended started off because I have... Is it my flag? Do you want me to take it off? Hello, hello? All right. Maybe that's going to help. So the Blended podcast started because I have a Woman in Supply Chain series on the podcast and the blog, and I wanted to do more in diversity and inclusion. And so I decided to put together a Red Table Talk type podcast and have 5 different people from different walks of life together to talk about diversity and inclusion topics in the workplace. And from there, we decided that, a group of us actually decided that we wanted to expand on that. And we realized that funding was essential for us to be able to see diversity on industry stages. And so the Blended Pledge is we give away grants to diverse voices to say yes to speaking engagements. So we actually cover travel expenses. And so we really want to be able to see that impact on industry stages. So thank you so much to Redwood Logistics for choosing Blended Pledge to be the philanthropy option for you guys tonight. So without further ado, I think what we're going to do is have everybody just sort of introduce themselves before we get started. Emily said, so it's not my mic flag. As Emily said, we are going to do Q&A, and we're going to do that at the end. So if you do have a question, make sure to keep it, and we will get to you near the end of the conversation. Is that one better? Yay. All right. So let's get to introductions. Charlie, let's start with you.
Okay. Is my mic on? Yes? Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Charlie Saffro. I'm the president and founder of CS Recruiting, and we are a third-party recruiting firm out of this Chicago market. We focus exclusively in supply chain, logistics, transportation. So I speak your language and am in this industry for the long run with you. It's nice to be here tonight.
Awesome. Thank you. Audrey.
My name is Audrey Ross. I'm an import and export compliance manager at Orchard Custom Beauty. We're a private labeling company specializing in beauty tools, bath accessories, and cosmetics. I ship worldwide to, I can now say 17 countries in the globe. So I manage the international trade, the customs, the compliance, the tax, all of the drama that goes into international shipping.
Well, and you're also the one known to say that you work with 14 different freight forwarders at TPM 2022.
Well-quoted address from 2021. And we're actually a small shipper despite the multiple locations. And so, you have to do what you got to do, roll up your sleeves and figure out how you're going to get this stuff moving. So.
All right, thank you. Elise.
Hi, Elise Lay. I'm the Vice President of Customer Experience at Parade. Our company builds tools for freight brokers, speaking of. I handle all the post-sales operations, so a few of my team members are here. Thank you, ladies, for coming out. And we do everything post-sale for the customer. So integrations, onboarding. We have a support team that handles all the tech issues. We have a customer success team that focuses on adoption to make sure our customers get the ROI. And then we're also building out a partnerships function to work with our almost 50 TMS and syndication partners. So thank you again for having me here. Very excited.
Amazing, thank you. And Hillary.
Hi, I'm Hillary Drake. I work for a manufacturer called nVent. We probably made the hangers that are holding up electrical you can see above us, among other things. So I work in, there's a word called lacuna, which is the space in between that is undefined. I work in that space between operations and supply chain, but also digital and finance and all the different parts. Right now I'm the product manager for logistics systems for our company, and my job is to bring all those people together to figure out how we're going to digitize our supply chain.
That's a big job.
Yeah, a little bit. But it's also a lot of fun. I like puzzles, and this is the most amazing puzzle.
Well, we're all problem solvers, I think, in supply chain and logistics as well. So it goes hand in hand. Very natural. Awesome. So, no worries. So I don't know if most of you know this, but Charlie Saffro was the first grant recipient for the Blended Pledge. So I'm going to start out with you just to sort of talk about your experience. And why do you think that that is so important and something that we need in this industry right now?
Yeah, so I saw the advertisement for the Blended Pledge, I think on LinkedIn, where I spend most of my time. And I applied right away. I knew Sarah, but I just was intrigued and want to do what I can to share my story and support other women in the industry. So I was awarded with the grant. I attended the CSCMP conference in Nashville a couple weeks ago, spoke about recruiting and retention, and really focused on the retention piece, the importance of culture, diversity, recognition, appreciation, all the things that keep us at our job and help our company recruit more people. So what was really cool about it is I was expecting to attend the conference alone, and then when I found out I was the recipient of the grant, I was able to bring 2 of my team members who both had a really awesome experience, one of them being a female. So I think that was like the real impact I felt. It was great to be up there speaking, representing the industry with 2 men on both sides of me, but to be able to have the travel expenses covered. I don't think most people realize these conferences can get very expensive. And so you've got to budget accordingly. So that was really what it went towards, just the representation and being able to expose more people from my team to our great industry.
Amazing. Thanks so much for sharing that. Now, a lot of people in logistics and supply chain, especially I think around my age, stumbled into logistics and supply chain, but I think we want to make it look a little bit more sexy, right? Like, how do we make it more attractive to women in the industry? So, Hillary, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I think the first thing we can do is just all of us really represent. The more we put ourselves out there, the more people see people who look like them, who sound like them, the more willing they are to consider it as a possibility. And frankly, we just need to talk about it. This is a lot of fun, a lot of the time, but it doesn't sound interesting until you get into the details.
Absolutely. Charlie.
I think it's sharing our stories and inspiring others. I think a lot of us, probably everyone in this room, came from humble beginnings, and I don't know if anyone in this room said, I want to grow up and be in the freight and logistics industry. I sure didn't. So you did.
Speak for yourself, Charlie.
Okay. I did not. But no, being able, exactly what you said, Hillary, just to show our network that we're similar to them. We're having fun doing this. We're challenged. We see opportunities because it is a really great career. And I'm proud to say in the last 2 years, about 26% of the people we've placed have been women. So not as close to Redwood's, 30%, but it's going up, and that's really encouraging and exciting to see more females enter and stay in the industry.
Absolutely. And Elise, how do you think we can attract more women to this industry? I think a lot of times we don't really realize the opportunities, right? And we can travel a lot in supply chain and logistics. We can move to different places and experience so much more than what they kind of teach us in school.
I would say, so when I would tell people what I did, the minute I said the word supply chain, their eyes would just glaze over. My best friend of 10 years said, what do you do again? What do you do again? And then the pandemic hit, and that changed everything. Right? All of a sudden, people are talking about boats. They understand what a container is. They get it, right? Because it impacted them. And I think that's the opportunity we have to take a hold of right now is show up, talk about what you do, talk about how cool it is, and the fact that if you're not doing your job, you person I'm talking to, you're not getting your stuff, right? And when you make that relatable, then people start to understand what it is that you do and how it impacts their everyday.
Yeah, and I think everybody's journey is different, getting to where they are. And so, Audrey, I know you have a pretty unique journey as to how you ended up in the position that you are today, and you just, went over to Europe. really to be a voice for women in trade. So talk to us a little bit about that, because even those are opportunities that we don't hear a lot about. And like all of you said, we need to talk about it. We need to use LinkedIn and platforms like social media to talk about what that journey looks like, what the opportunities are, what we've been able to do. So tell us a little bit about that.
So how I got started? I started as a summer student. I was invited to get coffee and schlep samples. We had a ton of samples working in beauty, accessories, and cosmetics. And so that was sort of the invitation. I showed up as a summer student, like, okay, I'm putting stuff away, I'm ready to go. And then like, can you work on this, like, type, can you type, can you use Excel, can you use this? Yeah, okay, no problem. Can you do this quote? Can you, I'll get a little louder. So I started as a summer student. Can you start doing this? And I didn't know what I wanted to do at the time. I was studying political science. And I was just like, what's next? What can I do? What can I help with? What can I learn? Because, I was sort of a blank slate. And I just kind of went from there. I ended up going back and getting hired, which was kind of funny because it was a startup company and they were desperate to hire people. So I came back the next summer and I was like, do you need a resume and like an interview, or am I just good to, start in the back because I know you're hiring? And then I sort of just got to move around. Like I said, I was curious. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So anything that was, we have this new customer, we have this new program, this needs to get done. It was like, okay, let's do it. And then I decided I'd been there about 4 or 5 years, and I was like, all I know is what I've learned here, which is a lot of stuff, and it's great. But I wanted something external, as I didn't end up finishing my degree. And I was like, well, let's go and take some freight forwarding classes. Let's take an international trade certificate, learn a little bit more about customs. And when I was introduced to that, which I love and get really, even though it's kind of tedious and dry for a lot of people, I get really into it. And then they had this random opportunity. I was supposed to move into one team. Our vice president of operations comes to me on the Friday afternoon and says, we need to move this person off of the traffic coordinator role. You took that class on freight forwarding, right? Okay. Monday you're going up to accounting, you're working on freight forwarding and tracking these shipments. Okay. So I did that for a little bit, and I realized, that based on the scale that we were shipping, I could do that about half of my day. So I was getting bored. And so I was like, what else can I do? So I kind of got to invent the role and went to my boss with the job title that I made up called Logistics and Customs Specialist, because they were a little sensitive about the word manager. So I gave them I need to change my job title. I've been doing this about 2 years. Here's 3 options. 2 of them say manager. 1 of them says specialist. So I'm the specialist now. And then same thing. We were doing that for about 4 or 5 years. Containers falling off boats, moving us into Europe, learning about VAT tax, moving us into now we're at 17 different countries. And so about a year ago, I started the thought process of hey, it's about time for me to get this a new job title. So again, I made up sort of my import and export compliance manager title, gave them a few options, and that's what we landed on. So that's been exciting. For me, I've had a lot of autonomy. I have a lot of learning, and just was given the chance, right? I was encouraged and empowered to just sort of make my way. And my European trip, interestingly enough, we're part of women in logistics groups, women in supply chain groups. I'm part of a group called the Organization of Women in International Trade. And that really looks at supporting women in trade and advancing their careers in trade. And that can typically be trade policy, economics, academic roles. And one of the things we decided to do this year was go to the World Trade Organization Public Forum, which, if you don't know about it, the World Trade Organization sort of sets the trade policy rules based on, government, geopolitical level topics. But they have this public forum that allows groups like ours to go and do presentations, run panels, and give sort of feedback on what it means to be, specifically for us, it's sort of women in trade or underrepresented trade groups. What does that mean? How can you get financing when you don't own a house, you don't have a bank account? So it really gave us this platform to kind of go through that. So, but again, it's everybody has their own story. My work paid for half of it. So I went and visited, we have an office in the Netherlands, an office in Paris. Work paid for half of it, and I paid for the rest of it because it's sort of volunteer. But these are the challenges that you face. I'm not a senior level, I'm not a vice president level person yet. So, that's what that looks like.
Thank you for sharing that, because then that actually takes it back full circle for you, kind of, right? Because that's what you went to school for. You brought it into your career within logistics and supply chain. And these are the journeys that I think we need to hear more about, because they're not just a straight line, right? They go in a variety of different ways. But you talked about characteristics. So let's talk about the characteristics that we need in supply chain. What are we looking for? What should people have? Hillary, I'm going to start with you on that one.
So I'm actually lucky enough to be involved in a lot of our on-campus recruiting right now. We are still hiring. If anyone has any younger siblings who are graduating this year and don't already have a job, we did not make all of our offers yet for our rotation program. But we're really looking for grit. We're looking for people who can keep going when they hit a problem and can solve it. And we're looking for curiosity and communication. We know we're going to be teaching the math. We're going to be teaching how operations actually works. My worst grade in my MBA was in Intro to Operations, because I kept arguing with the professor about just in time. Just in time does not work when the factory is 8 hours away from the warehouse. He gave me a C. I have no regrets. But at the end of the day, it's really about those analytical skills and about the mindset. The rest of it, we'll teach.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that. Elise, I think you've got some qualities and characteristics that you look for and talk about as well that you can share.
Absolutely. I think to Hillary's point, you will learn in this industry. Right? I think when you're entering for the first time, it's very daunting. I was very fortunate at a very young age to work with a lot of really big shippers. So Amazon, Unilever, Johnson & Johnson, all the Fortune 50s. I'm 21, right? I'm buying Supply Chain 101, Supply Chain for Dummies, Logistics If You've Never Done It Before books, trying to frantically read and prove myself to the customer, right? And then what I learned is actually, at a high level, supply chain is really simple, right? You have stuff, it's either raw materials or parts, they go to a manufacturing site, they gotta be produced into something, they go to a DC, and then ultimately out to the final consumer. So supply chains are all the same, but there's different companies because each company does or runs their operations in a unique way. And when you focus in and dial in on the details, you can actually start to solve problems. Right? So for us, we look for problem solvers. Right? We're not looking for people that can talk about concepts at a high level. We're looking for people who are going to come in, truly have a curiosity to understand the operations of either the customer, the vendor, or your own business with the purpose of solving a problem.
And that's been a main theme, really, between the three of you, is saying the word curiosity and for people to be curious. And I think for a lot of us on stage, curiosity has been a big part of our journeys and how we got into different roles, how we learned, how we got to where we are today. So what do you think is the difference between people who dabble in this industry and people who stay long term? Because I talk to a lot of people and they're like, I fell into this industry and then it got into my blood and I can't leave anymore. Charlie?
Yeah, it's interesting, my perspective on that. I think it comes down to sometimes their first employer or often their last employer in the industry. We talk to a lot of candidates that have been in transportation logistics a year or 2 years, and we get in touch with them, and all they want to do is run as far away from the industry as possible, and then we can't help them. But it's because of toxic environments. It's because of poor leadership. So I think that's really what it comes down to. A lot of these individuals enjoy the work. They enjoy their team. Non-competes also can really cramp someone's style if they want to continue on in the industry. So I really think it comes down to who they work for, the experience they have, and some people do have a poor experience and they're motivated to find something better. Those are the people that can continue on, but unfortunately there is a high burnout rate, a high turnover rate, And I hate when I hear somebody who's either unable to continue in the industry because of an employment agreement or they don't have the desire because of their last experience.
Yeah, I talked about non-competes in a webinar today. Now that's a whole other
I'm not a lawyer.
conversation that we're not going to talk about tonight. Elise.
Yeah, so I can't tell you how many times I've heard the phrase, Elise, you gotta get out. You gotta get out. Doesn't come unprompted though, right? Because it's a hard job. And I'm sitting there talking to my colleagues that have left the industry. They're all in big tech. And I was like, it's time to go, Elise. I'm like, yeah, I know. It's time. And actually, I want to share a really personal experience I had that changed the way I looked at being a part of this industry. I was at a company where the head of product, she was a female, she was the only female on the executive team. It's a 350-person company. She left that company, went to another one, a couple of years, called me, she said, hey, you gotta come work here, the product is great, the people are awesome. So I followed her there. 1 year later, she pulls me into a room and she says, I'm leaving. I'm going to Google, and I want you to come with me. And he was like, why are you leaving? She said, well, again, she was the only woman on the exec team at this company as well. She said, well, no one takes me seriously. No one is listening to my ideas. I can't do what I want to do. She said, you are not going to make it. She said, as a woman, she's like, also, you're pretty. No one is ever going to take you seriously. And I don't share this like humble brag or anything. I share this because seriously, that was someone I looked up to and followed, and she was telling me to get out. And I think because I'm so competitive, I was like, no, right? There's something that clicked in me. It's like, no, I'm not going to leave, right? I'm like, prove you wrong in a way. And I stayed at the company because I believed in the product, right? I saw the value that our technology was bringing to our customers, how it's changing supply chains fundamentally. And so I stuck around, and then I got promoted into the exec team, and I was the only one that did. And it wasn't because I said I wanted to get a promotion or because I was trying to climb. I truly believed in the product, and I made it my job to be a subject matter expert at what I was doing. So I think, it does take a lot of grit. It takes a lot of determination and dedication. And I think the difference between some people that make it and some people that don't is if you see yourself as a woman in this industry and you view it as a chip on your shoulder, I really encourage people to flip the script, look at it a different way. It's not a chip on your shoulder, it's an opportunity, right? You have an opportunity here to do something that others may not have been able to do. So accept the challenge, right?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, these are also the types of stories that we need to share and talk about as well. I mean, I was told that if I got pregnant, I wouldn't worry about a career. And that was, in my 20s. That was not something that I wanted to hear, and I didn't go on to have kids. So they were wrong. But they were also somebody that I looked up to, right? And I think these are just some of the comments that we do need to bring to light and talk about and share that vulnerably so that other people feel comfortable to share their own stories and talk about what's been said to them as well. So Hillary, what has your path to success looked like into your leadership role? Because we've heard from Audrey, we've heard from Elise, and let's hear from you.
Well, I also majored in political science, graduated in 2003 into a recession, not knowing what I was going to do with my life, and a temp agency sent me to a 3PL. 2 weeks later, I was managing their second largest customer. Small 3PL, but still. For me, I'm probably the opposite of Audrey. I have worked at, I think, 9 companies in the last 18 years. Because I successfully graduated into a recession a second time with my MBA. Don't try to beat that record, please. But for me, it's really grabbing those opportunities and also selling yourself and selling your ideas. On day 3 of my last role at the same company I'm at now, I told my boss that I wanted to completely change what he'd hired me for. There was a project we had to do, and I had to run it. And it took me 3 months to convince them, but then I spent the next 3 years doing an RFP and then a global implementation. And before COVID, I was traveling every month. I was going to Europe once a quarter. I was going to Asia once a year, and I might be again before long. We'll see. But there are so many opportunities for smart, dedicated people. And you have to reach out and grab that opportunity. And sometimes you have to make them see the opportunity exists because they just don't see it yet.
That's such a great point. And that just goes to all of your journeys as well. Charlie, what does your journey look like to your path to success? And you've had a different one, right? Because you're an entrepreneur. And so talk to us a little bit about that, because there's a variety of different paths that we can take.
Yeah, so I married a freight broker, and that's what got me into this industry. I actually had a career right out of college in advertising, and then when I was pregnant with my first son, I went back after a maternity leave. It wasn't as fulfilling, just traveling all the time, very thankless. So I asked my husband if I could come work for his company, and by that time, he was done with freight brokering. This was the early 2000s. He developed a load board technology, if you will. So I went to work for him, and the night before I'd already resigned, he actually changed his mind, and that was literally the one night of our entire marriage that he slept on the couch. And I still showed up the next day, and I was there to be an office manager, file papers, like there were real papers back then. And then all of a sudden they brought in a partner who wanted to grow, and they needed a recruiter, and I just figured it out. So this was 2006. Craigslist. I hung up a lot of flyers in Starbucks. I didn't have the luxury of LinkedIn, but stayed with their company until they sold it, worked for the new company on a project basis. And then I was pregnant with my third son and put myself on LinkedIn, and I was a transportation logistics recruiter. And I think I met Andrea and TSG, if anyone, I assume a lot of you know TSG, back in those days. So I was a one-woman show and just hustling, and one of my little secrets was I had a newborn who did not sleep for 6 months, so I got a lot of work done at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. And then I got to a point where I was just too overwhelmed and busy, and I never really wanted to start a business, but I had opportunity. So I hired my husband. He was my first employee. And then I'll make a long story short, I spent the first 7 years at my own company as an employee, and I liked it that way. I was out on the floor recruiting, I was an account manager, I wanted to lead by example, and I'm not a good people manager, and I knew that. So I had my husband on one side, we had a COO who was another man, and I truly hid behind them for many years, and I can admit that now that I look back, like legal issues, you guys deal with it. Financial, just let me recruit and bring in revenue. And early 2020, my husband and I had made a mutual decision he was going to step out of the business. And then our COO unexpectedly resigned. And that was like literally a moment where I was just like, can I swear? Like, oh shit, like what am I gonna do? And everyone's reminding me, like, this is your business, it's CS Recruiting, that's your name. But I had never led my own company. And it was the best thing that anyone's ever done to me. Like those two men leaving at the same time forced me to just empower myself and trust myself. And I've learned a lot about just, being emotional and having empathy in the workplace is probably the biggest superpower anyone can bring. But I know as a woman, a lot of times we see it as a weakness. And I think that's kind of how I felt when I let the men take charge. I was like, I'm too emotional, I'm too nice, I'm too compassionate. And now those are my strengths as a leader. So I'm going on year 3 of truly leading my company and love it. But I only manage one person out of 42 people. So you can lead without managing. I think that's a really important message too.
That's a very, very good point. And you have a funny story about one of your hires when you had a small child that you shared with me in our Women in Supply Chain series. You said, I have to hire, I want to hire you, but I also need help on a Wednesday or something.
Yes. So a big part of our company today is our culture. And our very first employee, once, or I should say second, after my husband started, again, we were growing, I needed to hire someone, and so my second cousin's college roommate's best friend was looking for a job. And so that's how I did it. I mean, I didn't know anyone, and I'm a recruiter, I should know how to hire, but I was so focused on my clients. And when I met her, she lived in the city. I was working from home, and I said, I promise if you take this job, we'll get business cards, we'll get an office, like we'll be a legit company. And, but I said, but on Wednesdays, I don't have a nanny. So I'm not working on Wednesdays. And you can work, but you don't have to come to Highland Park and take the train. So it's funny, because now looking back, like that one conversation shaped the entire culture of our company. We were hybrid since day one, where our employees worked from home 3 days a week. We all came into the office Monday, Thursday. That's when we had meetings. That's when we collaborated. But even before the pandemic, we had a split model. Now we're 100% virtual. But she's still with us today. She's my right hand. And we just laugh about it all the time. She's like, I can't believe that it was just you didn't have a nanny, and so you just didn't work on Wednesdays. But I worked Wednesday nights, like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. So I made up for it.
That's women supporting women and boundaries, all in one story. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, we've all come up against resistance, I think, in our journeys, and we talked a little bit about that. But let's talk a little bit more about that, because I think we've all felt some resistance. Hillary, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. So one of my companies that I worked for in the past, I was hired by an incredible guy who got a promotion, and then I went to work for his boss, another incredible guy. And when he left the company, I went to work for someone who is still sitting in that job with all white boys working for him now. It was, in retrospect, it was the kick in the pants that I needed. But boy, it sucked at the time, because literally everyone who works for him is just like him. I watch for that now, and I'm proud that I've gotten to a point where I can help people. I can protect people if I have to. I can bring things to HR that maybe they're not comfortable with. But I'm also blessed that I work for a company that has a woman CEO. And I work for a company that is 50% women in the C-suite, I believe, right now. It's very close to 50%. Because that's the second time in my life there has been a woman in my leadership chain. So it happens.
Thank you for sharing that, but also turning resistance into, part of your journey, but a positive part of your journey, right? You're empowering, you're elevating, and that's what we need to see more of, so that we can see more diversity in a variety of different roles, right?
Yeah. Elise mentioned earlier being stubborn. I just get angry most of the time, and I use that. Sometimes it's to my detriment in the long term, but I don't care. Honestly, I'm at a point where I know I can get another job, and if it's a hill to die on, I'm going to do that, because I know there are people who are more junior in their careers who aren't that lucky.
Thank you for that. Elise just said preach, so let's hear from Elise.
I've been sitting on this story. Well, only my therapist has heard it. So
Wow.
welcome. It was my first job. I was 20. I'm at a startup. We do supplier risk management. So we're working with pretty big companies. It's my first time being a customer success manager. This is when I was reading Supply Chain for Dummies.
It's a good book. I mean, Daniel Stanton does a great job.
Yeah. And I have to do a QBR. So I Google, what is a QBR? And I copy the template, I do what I think I'm supposed to do, and then I go present to the CPO of this. It's a public company. They do network, they build routers and stuff. You would know that. I won't say the name. And so I present the QBR, and our buyer calls my boss afterwards, and he said, who is this girl? She doesn't know anything. I want a crusty, old, white supply chain guy that's been in the industry for over 20 years. I'm not kidding. You can't make that shit. We can say shit. Shit, all right. You don't make that shit up, right? And my boss, she had been in the industry for 25 years, so she had already garnered respect. And she goes, look, she's all we got, right? As a startup, right? So I'm supposed to do a QBR again in 3 months, and I spend every week, 2 hours a week, doing a review for my next deck so I can actually go back and present to this guy, knowing what he's already said about me. And so I go in, I absolutely crush it, because no one should take that much time to prepare, but I did. And I got a lot of support from my manager, and he actually came up to me at a conference a little bit later. So then I switched roles. I was like, get me out of this. I don't want to be customer facing. I hate this. Put me somewhere else internal. He sees me at a conference, and he actually comes up and apologizes to me, right? Because the second QBR, I'm not kidding, was awesome. It was so good. And he said, I hope our experience or what had happened isn't the thing that caused you to move roles. It was, in a way, but it was very validating, right, to be able to not give up and have something like that be said to you when it's your first job, first time being in the industry, and just know that you can do it, right? Don't spend as much time as I did, probably, but you can do it.
Resilience.
Yeah.
Well done. Thank you for sharing that story. Is it true your therapist is the only one other than the whole
And
room
this
here?
whole, yeah. So just between us guys.
Well, it's being recorded, so you might see it out on the internet. Audrey, what resistance have you come up against or seen, and how have you used that to a positive?
I think, when I got started, I was really young, and the person who was leading the sort of freight forwarder management and maybe buying decisions before me was my manager, who is a man. And so when I came into the role and I was introduced to everybody, and he had said to me, there's a forwarder we don't want to use anymore. I've been dropping them, but you're going to have to end it. Okay? But we're not using them anymore, and we're busy. We're a startup, we're busy. And I'm like, yeah, no problem, fine. So, I get this. We sort of ghost them. We sort of just drop the business that we're doing and start shifting it. And I get this sort of call, we don't have any new bookings or whatever. And I was like, yeah, based on, the feedback that we'd previously given to you. He'd given me a list of complaints that they'd already made and conversations that they'd already had. Should not have been a super surprise that they were on their way out. But it was I had such a great relationship with your boss. Why is this such a big deal? And maybe I should talk to him because you're new, and so I was like, okay. I mean, if you really want to, you can do that. And then of course my boss is like, whatever Audrey says is that goes, and so I was lucky because sort of externally, dealing with buying transportation and sort of being, in your 20s and trying to negotiate these deals and follow up on these uncomfortable, bad deliveries, I at least knew that I had the support of my manager and our larger boss. That was pretty much whatever you say goes. So if someone comes and complains, they're literally going to have a conversation that's exactly the same thing as what I said. So I always felt very backed up internally, which meant a huge deal. And so, like I say, I've had a really lucky position to have so much autonomy. And so when you can give that to your, and that's what I try to do. I have direct reports now, and that's what I try to do with them. Make sure they feel that confidence and autonomy to make their decisions and give them the tools to make the best decisions. And the other thing I'll add to this conversation, I think Elise touched on it a little bit earlier, is that, I did face, as the new young person in the office, the student, the up-and-comer, I did, in our company, it's in cosmetics beauty tools. It's a woman-founded startup. We still now retain a woman CEO. It's 80% women. But what you would get was this was really hard for me, so I'm going to make it hard for you too. And we see that in a couple of areas in the world, where it's like, I had to do this really hard experience, so I think you have to go through this terribly hard, destructive, in some cases traumatizing experience that I went through because I went through it. And I think my motivation in sort of seeing that and experiencing it was to make sure that what I'm leaving behind is not a difficult experience. I'm not, yes, I had some uncomfortable conversations with forwarders. I was at conferences where men might say inappropriate things to me. We've had these sort of experiences. I don't want anyone else to go through this. So I try to make my leadership style or my management goals or my just personal goals to make this industry a better place for everyone working in it and not kind of enforce this sort of growth by punishment or growth by fire when it's just, in most cases, so unnecessary.
So let's talk about that, because we need to get into the women supporting women in the industry, in logistics. There's a couple of ways that we can talk about this. I know in our previous conversations we talked about support versus envy and what we can do about that. So maybe we start with that first, and then we can talk about how we can lift each other up, because that's a really important part of this as well, and really part of your answers when we're talking about that resistance. So Charlie, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I posted something on LinkedIn today. If anyone saw it, I'm going to repeat it. But I do think that there are two types of women in the workforce. There are women that support each other, lift each other up, root for each other, and there are women who are envious and usually insecure. And I've had my share of both, but I'm very grateful I've had more women supporting me and part of my community. But I see it a lot with our team. Right now we have 36 females out of just over 40 people. So I see the female cliques. I see the female envy. And that perspective is really interesting, but also very disheartening. And it can very quickly turn into a toxic environment. So I'm very happy, like the team we have today supports each other. One of our values is win together. We preach it all day, and we are a team. And I also will say being virtual has somehow really connected us more as a team, and a lot of that cattiness and clickiness has gone away. But it's an interesting perspective when you watch how two other women interact and how quickly it goes one way or the other on that spectrum.
Absolutely. I've had my share of both as well, and I'm pretty sure all of us on the panel has as well. Does anybody else want to talk about support versus envy? And then we're going to talk about, I think, how we can better promote ourselves.
Now, I'll jump in with one last comment. I mean, you can see, I try to have a compassion for the generations that have gone before us because, of course, their workplace experience, you can see specifically with sexism was so much more blatant. And the sort of working environment we have now has progressed. Like as Mark mentioned, we have progressed, and so you can see that generations that are sort of came before us, there was only one woman in the room, and they fought hard to get there, and they put up with a lot of crap to be there, and it's just kind of shifting that perspective of like, I'm the only person here, and I need to stay the only person here because that makes me the sort of unique person, and just for us to get in that practice of like, the more the merrier. The more of us, the better. So yeah, that's all I'd add.
Yeah, I'd just add being really intentional about supporting people. I will mentor anyone from our development programs who asks. I buy the women lunch. I take them out. I make sure they know what's coming. I make sure they know that I am always there for them for any question, no matter how dumb it seems. And if the guys want that, they know I'm available. But I make sure the women get it, whether they want it or not.
Amazing. So you're very intentional about that. And I think that's really what we have to do. And sometimes we have to broach the subject and ask the questions of people, because sometimes we don't realize that we're doing it or not doing it, and what other people actually need from us. So we do need to create those safe spaces for conversation. Now, one of the things that comes up a lot for me in my Women in Supply Chain series is that women do not promote themselves. they feel like they're being arrogant when they promote themselves across social media. Can we talk a little bit about that? Elise, do you want to jump in on that? And how can we best support ourselves as women in logistics and then support each other?
I struggle with this, admittedly, still. I don't post a lot. I don't like to repost a lot because there's this feeling of, hey, if I'm talking about myself, I'm bragging, right? But there's a difference, right? If you're proud of something, and you want to share it with the people that support you and the community that you're a part of, it's very different from I'm bragging to show off and tell people how much better I am than everybody else. Right? So I think understanding the difference and getting that in your head is you should be proud of what you did, and you should know that other people that are in your community that support you want to hear about your accomplishments. We do, right? When something good happens to a colleague, I want to hear about it so I can support them. If you don't tell me what you didn't do, what you did well, how can I applaud you, right? How can I thumbs up you? So I think that has been really helpful for me. I'm still working on it, but it's a good thing to think about, right? Is be proud and don't feel ashamed of showing how proud you are to the people that care about you.
Yeah, Charlie, you support a lot of women on LinkedIn. I know we both do, right? So what would you say to the people in this room as to how they can really support other women? What does that look like? Is it a reaction? Is it a comment? Is it a share? What does that look like?
Engagement, any type of engagement, and know that you not only can be inspired, but you can also inspire just with a comment. But to the question you asked before, I'm very active on LinkedIn today, but I wasn't for many years. I had a big network, but if you scroll all the way back in my posts, you'll see a really lame theme of like 5 interview tips and how to negotiate the salary you want, and it was all very focused on like my expertise as a recruiter or supply chain challenges. And in 2019, my middle son posted a video on TikTok that went viral. And on TikTok, if you're scrolling through it, you're like, it's just another TikTok. But I posted it on LinkedIn, and it was him and his friend shooting basketballs, and both of their basketballs went in the hoop, and they high-fived each other. And it went viral, and I think it probably got like 4 million views, so many comments, but that was the moment where I was like, oh, people do care about me beyond my expertise. And people were commenting like, I didn't even know you had kids. Like, if this is your kid, I saw him on ESPN, because he like really went viral on TikTok. And then a week later, my other son broke his arm, and like a really nasty break. And the x-ray, it's like, oh, whatever. And he had to have surgery, and he's a great kid. And his attitude was like, well, I've always got next season. And I posted a picture of his x-ray, and I told this story of like, I'm inspired by my kid, because I would have been miserable. It was the first basketball game of the season. He's out, he had surgery, and that went viral. And again, people were like, I didn't know you had 2 sons. I actually have 3. But that's the turning point. You have to put yourself out there. And I will tell you, like, there are haters every day. I know you guys probably feel it too. Like, I've made Reddit that was not a good thing. But there are always going to be haters, and my philosophy is if I inspire one person, if one person comments on my post and they're like, thank you for saying this, or this changed my perspective, or I'm going to go tell my colleague, to look at this post, that's what I'm in it for. And it does drive business, and that's the beauty of it. But whether it drives business or not, I think there is something very cool about social media where we do feel like, you don't want to brag. I don't want to put myself out there and, come across as arrogant. People like people. People want to work with people. They want your highs and lows. They want your drama. They want your wins, and that's how people connect. Nobody's going to connect with a logo and some mysterious person who's commenting from that logo. So I think that's really the name of the game, is that humans connect with other humans, and the only way we can connect is if we can find that commonality And the only way we're going to find that commonality is if somebody puts themselves out there. So I encourage you to do it. Take that step. It's scary, but you just have to know if one person walks away inspired, you did your job that day.
Can I add in, though, too, LinkedIn is more of a safe space in terms of social media because it's pretty hard to get on there without having your name and your employer. So, like, and I've seen people do really, you're like, you do realize I know who you work for and what your name is. So, you know, you do find, like, yes, you get these weird comments, but, you know, I've been very lucky, but I haven't had too many people drop in my DMs trying to ask me out or anything. But I've heard, you know, some people get, like, that's a whole thing that they deal with every day, right? And that sucks. It's stressful. You know, that can really depress your experience on that platform. However, when you do see people and you do have at least a couple of friends on LinkedIn, when you do get comments that are kind of random, like I got told I don't know how to import because I had a vessel that containers fell off of, and so I was kind of updating people on, like, the containers fell off this vessel, it might be my stuff, it might not be my stuff, here's my little drama. And then some guy was like, you just don't know how to import. And I was like, well, they just don't know how to drive a boat, but like, okay, somebody who works at whatever, you know? And so then it's like you can have your friends go in and be like, excuse me, person who works at this company, like, who I'll never hire as a freight forwarder, you know? But so I do feel like LinkedIn at least is a more safer space if that, you know, sort of is a, you know, a concern for a lot of us, but you do have that backup.
Well, and it's important to a career, right? Like, it's really how we're networking online is through LinkedIn. I mean, some of it's done on Instagram. There's a lot of stuff that goes on Twitter that I just can't keep up with.
That's my jam.
That is Audrey's jam. If anybody is on Twitter, make sure you go and follow her because she talks about her
Because there's
daily
stuff you can't say
coffee.
on LinkedIn.
That's true, because you don't have your employer on there. All right, so let's talk about some of the progress we've made. Because I think we have made progress. I think there is more representation, specifically in conferences and trade shows. Hillary, I'm going to send it over to you. What kind of progress have we made? Do we have a long way to go? What, in your opinion, does that look like? And I think it's going to differ across many people in this room. But in your perspective, what do you think?
Well, I've been on the customer side for almost all of my career. I have women sales reps now. It's not just crusty old white supply chain guys calling on me anymore. So for me, that is huge progress because I'm not the only woman in the room at every single meeting. I am at way too many, but not always anymore. And they're not all younger than me, which makes it honestly even better because I'm finally meeting people at my level who are going through this same journey. We still have an incredible way to go. I was at SIG in August, and I think it was maybe somewhere between 10 and 20% women. And I know there are a lot more women users. I want to see the same level of gender parity moving into the digital space, but we need to figure out how to make that culture safe because I've worked on some of those teams and I wouldn't go back to a lot of that. So how do we empower people? How do we build those supportive cultures and also enable people to take risks? Because my husband works at a software company where when things go wrong, that's fine. What can we learn from it? Let's do an RCCM. Let's figure out what we're going to do better next time. But people's careers don't end because of those mistakes. And I've been places where that does happen sometimes.
Well, and there's a lot of mistakes to be made all over the place, and especially in supply chain. I mean, look at the last couple of years. KPIs, what KPIs? I've kind of gone out the window, but that's a whole nother discussion. Charlie, what are you seeing? I know you have some stats that you want to share with us.
Yeah, I attended my first industry conference in 2011, and I remember going to the Women in Logistics lunch, and it was like one table. And I was like, oh, wow, I was very honored to be invited to this women's lunch, but it was all the women at the conference. And I actually reached out to them preparing for tonight, and I just said, how many female members did you have in 2011 compared to today? And 10% of their membership was female in 2011, and today it's 45%. So, yeah, I mean, I think just stories like that, you don't realize how much progress we've made. And I went to the Women in Logistics lunch this year, and it was a whole room, and there were actually a lot of men in the room who came to hear the women's stories as well. So look at this. I mean, this is a great testament to women coming together and how far we've come. So it's, yeah, we still have work to do, but I've seen a lot of change in the past 12 years or so.
And what are some of the biggest opportunities still remaining, Elise?
I would like to answer this question with a question. So, how many of you, more often than not, find yourselves in a situation where you are in a room with less than 50% female? Less than 25%. You're the only one. Okay, cool. So that's progress, right? Still a lot of work to do. By show of hands, how many people feel completely comfortable to be unapologetically and unabashedly yourself in the work environment? That's awesome. That's really awesome. I think the opportunity is not just, hey, let's hit a quota and get more women in the industry. I think it's a leadership challenge to create culture. It always starts at the top. That's about safety, right? It's okay for you to ask a question. It's okay for you to say what you're thinking because you're not going to get fired over it, right? We'll learn from it. And so I think both have to happen at the same time, right? I think women feel more comfortable being around other women, so let's get more women in the room. And secondly, leadership does have responsibility, and everyone does, to support people in being themselves, right? It's about creating a safe environment.
Yeah, creating safe spaces for those discussions. That's what I do on Blended. And the amount of people that come together at the end of conversations, where it's really just a safe space for people to be able to share what they're feeling, what they're thinking, and actually learn from it, right? Because they might go into a conversation not really understanding something or having one perspective and then leaving that conversation potentially with another. Sorry, this thing keeps going off and on.
Yeah, and I see that a lot, right? Where someone will be upset about a decision that a manager made or a team made or the company made or the direction that something's going in, and it's because they weren't able to give their input. Right? You can only make a decision based on the information that you have, right? Your voice, what you say, what you're thinking, that's a part of the decision-making process. So you do have to say something. I always tell people this. It's also the TSA slogan. I know. It's see something, say something, right? So you see a bad behavior, say something, right? You see good behavior, say something, right? But if you don't say anything, no one can ever know. I think that's really important.
Thank you for that. And let's talk about opportunities with skills, right? Because I get a lot of people that come to me and they're like, I want to upskill, but I have no idea in what area and what I should be looking at and what I should be thinking about. So let's talk about what that looks like for women in logistics and what we should be maybe taking a look at for the future of the industry, right? We've got technology, digital adoption. We're going in so many different directions. Hillary, did you want to start us off for that one?
Yes, I have some pretty strong opinions here. So 10 years ago, I was doing just plain old transportation work. I was entering contracts in TMS. I was dialing for carriers when I had to. I was doing analytics in Excel. Everything I did then is automated now. Everything I did 5 years ago is going to be automated in 5 years. So for me, that is what we need to be doing, is keeping ourselves very literate in technology and analytics and data. The most important thing right now that I can't do is measure my actual customer experience. And I'm trying to fix that. that at the end of the day, we are one of the most important parts of a business that people don't think about until things are going wrong. We need to learn the data, learn the technology as things progress towards automation, because I hope we're not typing bills of lading in Excel in 10 years.
I think I was using a typewriter like not even 10 years ago to type out checks to steamship lines. But anyways, they're not doing that anymore.
No comment.
Okay, we've got some work to do, people. I think collaboration and communication is really important as well. It's a soft skill that I think everybody can take the future of this industry. Okay, Charlie, you're a recruiter, so what are you seeing in upskilling? Where would you say that people should really focus their efforts?
In the 3PL space, I would say that 8 out of 10 new clients come to us, and when we ask them what skills they want to see, they want a book of business and no employment agreement. And those are not skills. And that's a unicorn who doesn't exist. So I think it comes down to people skills. And like Hillary said, technology is my belief, and at least in my segment, technology is never going to replace the human experience. It's going to let us do more in a period of time. So a carrier rep moved 4 loads a day 10 years ago. Now with technology, they can move 12 loads a day. And you still need people and to maximize that experience. So I think people skills are, once we kind of manage expectations with the client and explain what skills are, then they kind of touch on the soft skills. Well, we want them to be a cultural fit. Okay, what are the skills that will make them a cultural fit? So communication, collaboration, creativity is so important in this industry, resourcefulness, writing skills. So there's a lot, but it all comes back to people interacting with people to make things happen.
Yeah, and looking at things a lot differently. I had a student that came out of the supply chain program, and she looked at warehousing and saw it as interior design for supply chain. So really thinking about things very differently than we have in the past. So what about the future of the industry? Overall, what are we looking at, Elise, and what are some of the career opportunities that you think are out there for women in logistics to really open their hearts and minds to? Are you okay?
I'm not crying. I just have a cough. Like if you get a tickle in your throat and you're trying to hold it in.
I just wanted to make sure. I mean, this is a great conversation.
I know.
She did say that earlier.
No, so sorry. I just have this. I don't want to cough into the microphone and cause a scene. Super successful with that. No, I'm good. So I work in tech, right? I've always worked at tech companies, serving shippers and now currently 3PLs. So technology, I preach this all day, every day, right? We're trying to make sales. Our tool is not going to replace your job, right? And you're constantly convincing people. The opportunity we have with technology increasing is the fact that you don't have to have 20 to 25 years of supply chain experience to work in this industry anymore, right? You used to, you don't anymore. Right? To Hillary's point, stuff that she used to have to do manually, it's no longer manual. So everyone has an opportunity, especially women, to enter into this space if you can solve problems, right? And show that you know how to adopt the technology, right? You know how to make changes, right? It doesn't have to be with tech, it could be with process and then related to operations, but you can make an impact and you can make a change.
Yeah, I love that. And what are you seeing as far as jobs, Charlie?
In the industry.
Yeah.
I would say as a whole, it is still very much a candidate's market, meaning that there are more jobs than there are available, qualified, interested candidates right now. But we're starting to see, the industry and the job trends go with the market, and sometimes they're a little after the fact. So, when the steamship crisis happened, every international client and freight forwarder was calling us looking for import, export, exports, as if that was going to make a difference in getting their, container out of the middle of the ocean. So another example is we work with a shipper that has always manufactured in China. And when the pandemic struck, they called us and said, we need to find someone who is going to help us set up our manufacturing facilities in Mexico so we can haul our goods back easier and without as much risk. So that's a lot of what we see right now. Definitely an uptick in like marketing roles, which is, I think it's great that companies are starting to really think about their brand, not only for sales and marketing to customers, carriers, vendors, but also for talent. So we're starting to see a lot about brand content. I talked to 2 clients today that wanted content creators. So I think that's pretty cool. And that also is creating a space for women. And not to say women are more creative than men or anything like that, but I don't think a lot of women think, I think the younger generation, everyone wants to be in social media. It's like what they do in their spare time. So if they can make money on it, that's even better. But now they can enter this industry. They don't have to be a freight broker. They don't have to be a truck driver. So it's creating a lot of interesting opportunities, lots of analytical positions too. And I think companies just think that if we knew more, and they're right, if we knew more, we wouldn't have these problems. So we need a pricing analyst, a data scientist, somebody who really is going to help us make sense of all this information we have. But I'm hopeful that the jobs will continue to be out there, and a lot of companies are creating new positions and growing, and that's what we're seeing, which is really encouraging. It's not only turnover and filling a vacant spot.
And how important are degrees and certifications? I get this question all the time. Are they changing their minds around degrees? And
they're not important. And I have a hard time saying that because I went to college, and this is crazy, my sophomore had a meeting with his school counselor yesterday about college. And I'm like, what? It starts now? And of course I'm encouraging him to get an education. I truly think like what I gained with my degree was maturity. And it's that 4 years of life, whether you go to college right after high school or you take a couple of years off, you grow up, you become independent in most situations, you learn how to adult. And that is, to me, yes, I learned PowerPoint, and I didn't get email till I was a sophomore in college, which is so wild, it just didn't exist. But not a lot. And it's, I don't know how I feel about it. It's kind of encouraging because it's giving more people more opportunity, but it's also kind of discouraging when we think of how hard we work on our education and how much money and time we invest. But we very, very rarely see that as a requirement.
awesome, thank you for that. Should we do some Q&A? I've got 2 last questions for these ladies, but I think we should do some Q&A first. So does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask the panelists? Got one right there. Do we have a mic? Right there. Lift up your hand. Yeah.
Have you ever
Do you want to state your name for us and then ask your question if you don't mind?
Should I stand? Sure. Hi, I'm Kelly. I'm from Parade. Have you ever faced retaliation for speaking up in the workplace?
That is a great question. Who wants to take that one? I know, Elise, you were talking about safe spaces. Have you ever experienced it where you've...
I fortunately have not, because I've always worked at startups. So everyone is at a startup working towards the same goal, and all that matters is outcomes, right? If you don't say what you think, or if you don't challenge or speak up, you're not moving the company forward, right? So it's an expectation, but I feel like that's a luxury that I've had. And for folks that I've come to work with, they haven't had that luxury, right? They haven't had that ability to feel safe to say something. And so something that comes very naturally to me, because it was an expectation throughout my entire career, is something that has actually been learned, because I've heard from so many people that I've worked with that they have faced retaliation. And to me, I'm looking at some of my team members now, I'm like, why didn't you say something? That's crazy. And they're like, oh, I was afraid I'd get fired or something. I'm like, I would never fire you for like telling me what you think, but you sit down with them and you ask them about their experience, and they've actually had experiences where people, their colleagues or themselves, have gotten threatened to get fired or actually gotten fired for saying what they think. So long-winded way of saying I'm very lucky because I haven't, but I know just through working that I'm pretty sure almost everyone has. So.
Yeah, I worked for my family business, and so theoretically I guess they could fire me, but they might not fire me. And I spoke up all the time, and I was in HR, which was my mother's office, at least once a year. So I guess in retrospect, I did get some retaliation for speaking up, but it didn't stop me. But I did have the privilege of working for a family business, although they threatened to fire me on many occasions. Anybody else? Do we have another question in the audience for the panelists? Don't be shy. Now's your time to get some answers from some of these lovely ladies. We've got one at the back.
I have a loud voice. Hi, I'm Jillian. My question is, how do you guys navigate the whole pay gap with men on my team, and we work the same job, and because I'm a nosy person, sometimes I'll ask, and it gets kind of, uncomfortable, and I just want to know what about regulation.
Audrey, do you want to ask that one or answer that one? I know you have a story.
I worked at a woman-founded company that was a startup, and so money in startups can be a bit interesting. And I went through a couple of years with a boss who would not have a conversation about compensation, to the point where I was like, I'm gonna leave. And I got a different manager who was a woman and who was like, wait, how much are you getting paid, and why are you working a second job? Let's look into this, and supported me that way. And then I was having a conversation with the person who ended up becoming our CEO, and it was like, pay it's a constant, and for some companies it's a very uncomfortable topic, and there it gets very personal, especially I would say in the startup business. But you have to sort of push for it. You have to be willing to walk away. That's what's unfortunate. I think the tactic that I've taken in replacement of maybe being able to do something in the situation that I'm at, in the direct contact that I'm in, was on LinkedIn, on my social media, when I talk about share things, I talk about that there are pay gaps. I acknowledge the metrics that come out. Just last month, the metric comes out that I believe it is African American women in September have finally sort of made the same amount of money as a male counterpart, right? So you have all these metrics that are out there. They're sort of pushed by the United Nations reports on these kinds of things. So I bring those up, right? If I can't, maybe I'm not in a position to have that direct conversation, I'm bringing them up constantly in what I'm talking about and what I'm doing, and just trying to make that clear that, or I applaud when they, like now LinkedIn is doing job postings that show the salary. I make sure I'm like, yes, do that. Let's see more of that. So I think ideally you can have the conversation directly. Ideally you can just keep working around it. But if you can't, then it's like, do what you can, which is to just bring that awareness and keep encouraging the fact that it is an issue, it is a significant issue. Here's what may be being done, here's what the gaps are, and yeah, that's
So I'm lucky enough to work for a pretty large company that has a compensation team that literally works on these things. So it is a little bit different because this is something we're extremely committed to worldwide. If you don't know about askmanager.com, she has some fantastic resources, including good ways to have exactly this conversation. One thing that I think is so important is to just talk about it. If there are people in the same role as you, people at the same level of responsibility and experience, legally you should be paid the same. That is not nice. That is the law in the United States. Equal pay for equal work. So of course your employer wants to do the right thing, and of course this is an oversight that they want to correct. But you have to talk to each other. And that vulnerability often has to start with you, because when you open up, you open the door for other people to reciprocate. And what's the worst that's going to happen? You go find a job somewhere else where you get a promotion.
Can I add to this? I've managed both men and women. 100% of the men that I've managed have asked me for a raise. Very little women have actually asked me for a raise. It's an uncomfortable conversation. No one likes to talk about money. But if you don't have the conversation, it's never going to happen, right? And so I think know your worth, right? Come prepared with facts, because there's data. And look at yourself in the mirror, have that conversation to yourself 10 times, and then go in the room and do it, right? Because to Hillary's point, what's the worst thing that can happen? They're not going to fire you, because then you have to explain that, oh, I just fired her because I'm not paying her enough. Like, that's awkward, right? So just remember that, always think about what's the worst thing that can happen, right? And is that a valid fear?
Absolutely, great point. Did you want to jump in, Charlie?
That was my first, the initiative I was most passionate about when I assumed a leadership position. The majority of our team earns a base salary and uncapped commission. So back in the day, the philosophy was they want more money, they should just work more. Like, they're making commission, work harder. It's sky's the limit. And in the past 2 years, we have made tremendous progress. And our leadership team, our goal is to normalize conversations about compensation. So we have a compensation philosophy that's public. We have compensation bands that it was hard to do that. Like, it wasn't hard to figure out what the bands were. It was hard to normalize that and put it out there. And the fear as a leader is, if somebody sees 40 to 60, how do we put them in their place by saying you're at 42 now, you can get to 60, but you're not there yet. So we normalize it that way and just try to create a safe space. We have meetings with every employee, myself and our VP, twice a year. And that is the last question we ask. How do you feel about the money you are making today? Where do you want to be in 1 year? Where do you want to be in 2 years? And sometimes the answers, we can't always satisfy them, but we could at least guide them and say, this is what the potential looks like. So it used to be a total taboo topic in my own business, and today it's out there because it has to be. And I think it also is a really good retention strategy. Like, we are not keeping secrets here. If you want to go to another company and you can make $10,000 more by leveraging an offer, let's see how they treat it and let's see how you progress there. So it's all about normalizing it.
Well, and creating a plan to help them get to that goal too, right?
Exactly.
And it's all about that support. Do we have any other questions in the audience before we ask the last two questions? No questions? All right. Well, we are going to wind this down then. I've got two more questions for each one of you. If you could give some words of advice to your 25-year-old self, what would you say? Charlie?
Oh, let me go last.
Okay, Hillary. We'll start on the other end. Hillary.
So I would probably tell myself, remember that mediocre white bro from your classes, act like him more. I'm serious. Don't volunteer for anything he wouldn't volunteer for. Promote yourself when he would promote himself, and walk into the room with his confidence. I act like a dude at work a lot because that's who I interact with. And I do better when I adopt those mannerisms.
Well, and also go after positions that you may only be 75% qualified for and ask for the raise.
Yes, I started applying for positions where I hit at least 50% of the qualifications 7-8 years ago, and I get the interviews. weirdly enough, the jobs I don't get are the ones where I did hit 100% of the list.
Right.
Because they already had
Amazing.
an internal candidate.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for that. Elise.
So the funny thing is, that's what I was gonna say, because I do give that advice. But then I ran it by my boyfriend, who is he's not mediocre, but he is a white dude, and he said, I don't think you can say that. And so I came up with the second thing that I tell people, which is nobody cares. All right, and I say this in the kindest way. If you're a good person, if you are kind, if you know you gave it your best shot, and you're good to the people around you, no one else is thinking about you. Right? When you mess up, nobody's thinking about you. Everyone is thinking about themselves, seriously. So no one cares. And when you stop thinking or worrying about what other people think, you are really freed to do your best work, right? And be your best self, not worrying so much. So yeah, I say that all the time. Who cares?
Then we do the most detriment in our own minds.
Yes. Exactly.
Audrey, your 25-year-old self, what would you say?
25-year-old self.
Let's do this.
I mean, to echo Hillary's point, I mean, I spent a lot of time on admin stuff, and to be like, just trying to identify. If I just identified some priorities then and focused on the priority stuff that you kind of knew was a priority, and less on the sort of busy work. But I felt confident that I could do the busy work, so I felt like, oh yeah, I'm achieving something because I'm doing this busy work. But yeah, if I could tell my 25-year-old self, it's like, do not do the admin stuff. Do not do, try to push through that stuff so that you can do the bigger projects or get in front of people with the ideas. That sooner than what I've done. That's probably what I would say.
Thank you for that. Charlie, are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't mean to be all like Brene Brown up here, but I will say.
Oh, do it. This is a safe space, right?
No, I have learned everything I know about this industry and recruiting by asking questions and being vulnerable. And I think, yes, there's part of me that fakes it till I make it, but we all suffer imposter syndrome. Elise, you're absolutely right. Nobody's thinking about anyone else. But when we are, like, I literally have learned everything talking to, a warehouse supervisor in one call, a CEO in the next call, and a pricing analyst the call after that. And when they use jargon and acronyms, I would say, I don't know, can you explain that to me? Now I've gotten better, like I'm really quick at Googling and I can, but it's a balance of like vulnerability and confidence and asking questions and not being ashamed if you don't know something, because people want to talk, they want to share, they want to educate. So I think absolutely like vulnerability belongs in the workplace, and it only makes us all more connected and stronger.
Absolutely. Thank you all. So the last question I always ask my panels is, what should everybody walk away from this discussion? Either thinking about, putting into action, doing right away. What's the one thing that we can leave them with? Charlie, I'm going to start with you. Okay. We're going to go that way.
Share your story. I want every person in this room to tag me when they post something on
Me
LinkedIn
too.
tomorrow. And Sarah, no. No, share your story. I mean, I hope that my story inspires you. Like, I was really nervous to put myself out there, and how was I going to be perceived? And it's changed a lot of things. So don't be afraid in whatever format, even if it is a comment, even if it is a conversation, that's how we'll spread the word.
Great. Thank you. Audrey.
Yeah, sort of two things. I mean, on the social piece, yeah, like encourage your friends, encourage the people you follow, and lift other women up. Like sometimes I feel a little silly because I'm adding all these comments like "great job" and "bravo you," and I genuinely mean it, but it feels a little silly posting on LinkedIn. But like when I get those comments, it makes my day. When I get tagged in things, when I like people's stuff, when we celebrate people's achievements, like that's what helps amplify those stories. And then the other thing is, yeah, it's don't be afraid to stand out a little bit. Right? Like, don't be afraid to make your mark.
Elise.
Make it a priority for everyone to know that you have space for them and you are there for them when they need you. When I met Charlie virtually last week, I friend requested her on LinkedIn, and she replied and said, I'm sorry I can't add you as a friend because I've reached my max limit.
It's true. It's true. LinkedIn
They have a
caps
max
you.
limit of
I'll let you
connections
in.
on LinkedIn, a connections platform. She hit that. I was like, oh, it's okay. I'm just super excited to meet you, blah, blah. And she replied and she said, I'll make space for you. And now we're connected.
It's very hard to delete someone on LinkedIn. So that's why I can't do it more often. They make it so hard, but I did delete someone for you.
Yeah, and so I'd never even met her yet, but I felt a genuine connection, and I know that I can reach out to her and lean on her because she made space for me, quite literally, right in her network.
Number 29999.
Yes.
Hillary.
Trust your gut. You can fly. And if you are not sure if you should do something, don't let doubt hold you back. Also, go take a SQL class.
Well, we have heard so much from all of you lovely ladies today on this panel. Is that one working? We've heard so much great advice. We've heard that the industry is progressing, but that we still have some ways to go. We've heard about how we can support each other a little bit more and what we can do and take into the world after this conversation. So I want to say thank you to Emily and the team over at Redwood, Elena, Mark, Jane. Thank you so much for having us. And thank you to the panelists and thank you to the audience for being with us today. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
I think putting yourself out there is so important. I lack that myself, so the reminder there to be vulnerable, to have the grit, to do all those things, to take the chances. Being intentional, you mentioned that earlier, and I think that we come up with all these ideas, like we're gonna do these mentor programs, we're gonna do all these things, but we never execute, or we do and it just lacks and we don't really put that whole thought out there. So that was really big. And then the safe space. So we are recording this so that we can do viewing parties afterwards. And I think for Redwood specifically, that safe space and making that for your peers and just talking through that will be really, really relevant. So I applaud you guys. This was fantastic. I really appreciate it.
Give a huge round of applause. They killed it. You guys are inspirational, and I think, personally, as a mediocre white dude, it's not just for the women in the room and the other folks in the room to learn, but we need to learn also. It's starting the conversation, and it's evolving, right? And so I think these events are so important, and so the more we can push that out there and learn more, kudos to all of us and kudos to you guys, so thank you for showing up. And then I'm only up here for one specific reason. We want to thank somebody from our team specifically for putting this together for 4 or 5 years now. And I think we'll go backwards, then we'll go forwards, but this is, Emily's been with us for 19 years now. So I think that's a testament to, round of applause for that. And again, the whole thing here is to own your shit, right? And be proud of what you did. And I'm sure she's hating me and all of us right now for doing this, but that's just too bad. That's the theme of tonight. And the point is, Emily came in and we're at 32% right now. We're going to creep to 38. We'll get to 42 and then hopefully we'll get to 50. But when Emily started, I think there was 14 other people, and it was a bunch of dudes and a lot of underachieving, not even mediocre white dudes in a locker room. And it smelled like a locker room. It sounded like a locker room. It was gross. And she was brave enough to come on board and really be our first female employee on the commercial and the customer side. And since then has held, pretty much every job on the sales and leadership side. Building her own pod out, starting our St. Louis office, being our first enterprise SaaS employee. And I think it's really just a proof statement to what a trailblazer she's been for Redwood. And the good news is the industry is recognizing this. And so this year, supply and demand chain executives, thank you so much. Executives, Women in Logistics 2022 award was granted to Emily. So we want to. You got to hold it up and you got to get a picture. But thank you for everything you've done for Redwood, and thank everybody for being here tonight. And now we can have some drinks and I'm talking. Thanks.